this morning and coming here. I expect you've got a lot of stuff planned for today. The turkeys are sizzling, no doubt. If you manage to get one, we didn't get bird flu first. Roast potatoes. Making you hungry, are we? Okay. And those remaining gifts are dying to be unwrapped. So thank you for being here. But we want to talk just for a few minutes about the gift that needs to be unwrapped. Some years ago, a pastor of mine gave me a very simple instruction, prophetic instruction. He said, Wes, remember, yes. It was the longest prophecy I'd ever had. Remember, yes. What was that all about? It's about me saying yes to him. The Christmas story is about people who said yes and people who said no. Mary, the girl interrupted, the girl whose destiny changed, the girl who probably had all kinds of dreams about what her home was going to be like with Joseph, where she lived, what they would do together. Suddenly is interrupted by this supernatural being who tells her she's going to give birth and carry in her body God infused into an embryo. She didn't read the contract. She didn't know the small print. She didn't know how much it would upend her life. But because she had a heart after him, she said yes. And you and I potentially have our lives changed because she said yes. Joseph, her husband, said yes. I mean, they were engaged, but in those days and in that culture, it was a legally binding thing. And she and he would have suffered major public embarrassment. The zealots of her day would have wanted to stone her for being pregnant by someone that wasn't Joseph. In fact, that's what the law said ought to happen. The family would have been highly embarrassed. And Joseph himself wanted to divorce her quietly because he was honorable. And God said to him, don't do that. I'm behind this. And he said, yes. The shepherds were gathering. Sometimes we imagine them sitting around a fire pit or something, washing their socks, as the old mockery of the carol used to go. There with their burgers and fries or whatever they had, knocking back the cider. Maybe it was like that. Maybe it wasn't actually. Because this was a place where lambs were born, and some of those lambs were prepared for sacrifice, and they were wrapped in strips of cloth and put in a safe place so they didn't hurt themselves. But they said yes. And they ran to see Jesus. I mean, these are weird things. These are weird encounters. These are weird experiences. They're outside our normal zone of life. Angels, lights, hearing voices. And yet God was starting to move. Getting dreams where God speaks through a dream. There was the yes of the wise men, the kings, the magi, whatever you want to call them. For them, it meant possibly a 2-year journey through the desert on camel. But they said yes to the cost. But all around their yeses, there were a load of no's. There was the no of society generally. I mean, this was a difficult era. Politically, it was a government that was highly oppressive. It was a police state. And they were being ordered to travel to the place their ancestors came from so they could be counted up to make sure everyone was paying enough tax. I mean, this was an economic upheaval. It was oppression of the poor. It was a social upheaval because everybody was on the road at once, going north, west, east, and south. The traffic jams for Christmas began that day. Whether anyone was on strike, I don't know. But it was busy on the roads. There was too much going on. And in the midst of that, the people were pressurized. Some of them were probably in fear of having to show up to have their name put down on a list while the policeman, the Roman soldiers, stood over them with a sword. And their name was recorded so that they could pay more money to the government. There were others who were meeting relatives, maybe for the first time in years, maybe for the first time ever, and the parties were going at the same time. And they were squashed into all the bedrooms of the house, on the floor, in their sleeping bags and on their mats. And in the midst of this chaos and celebration, is that a good description of Christmas? Chaos and celebration. In the midst of that, Jesus appears, but most people don't notice. And most people have no idea that that's what it's really about. But a handful say yes. And to those who said yes to him, he gave the right to become God's children. Saying yes is a bit like your Christmas gifts. There are 3 stages to a yes when you're given a gift. Number 1, you got to take it. You don't leave it under the tree. You take it. Number 2, you unwrap it. You don't take it and take it home wrapped up in paper and leave it at home wrapped up in paper and get it out again the next Christmas. Do you, Jonah? Never. Yeah. I mean, are you a paper ripper? How many paper rippers do we have? I mean, some of you are probably not paper rippers. Some of you are take the tape off carefully, fold the paper, and use it next year. But however we unwrap, it has to be unwrapped. Because if we don't unwrap it, we haven't really received it. We haven't really said yes. And the third thing you've got to do is you've got to actually use it. If it's your toy, you play with it. If it's your woolly socks, you put the woolly socks on. If it's a really bad jumper, you wear the really bad jumper. Even if it's for a few minutes. Because receiving the gift, saying yes, means I've got to take it, unwrap it, and wear it. And saying yes to Jesus is a bit like that. It's saying, yeah, there's a whole load of stuff going on in life right now, politically, socially, economically. It's not a pretty picture. But somewhere in the midst of it, Jesus is still there. And I can say yes to him. I can say, yes, I receive you in my life. Yes, I want to unwrap your good stuff, the things you've done. And I want to put those things into my life. Whenever I've said yes to him, my life has changed for the better. Whenever I've said no, my life has changed for the worse. Yes is best. And I want to encourage us this Christmas, enjoy everything, but somewhere in the midst of it, let there be a little bit of a kind of lift your ear to heaven kind of thing. Lift your mouth to heaven, just say yes. Jesus, yes. Jesus, I want you. I don't understand. Mary she hadn't got a clue. It's easy for us to read it in hindsight. She didn't know what was going to happen the next day, the next week. She said yes. That's what faith is. It's saying yes when you can't necessarily see what the yes means. But in it, we trust that God is good. And in a bad word, we need a relationship with a good God. And so, Father God, today we thank you for your gift.